I've gone out on jib jobs where they might necessarily only think it's for one shot. And then they realize, oh, well, we're on the jib. We can, yeah, we don't, it doesn't need to constantly be moving. Let's just use the jib to get the over. Let's just move the set around and we'll put the jib over here to get the high shot. Um, and that kind of leads into another job that Jason and I did where it was a corporate show where there were a couple of technocrane moves, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Jason, when you figured, well, we're on the technocrane, we might as well be on the technocrane all day. I think we were on that one as well. I don't remember certain, but I mean, there were two shots that were definitely technocrane, pushing through crowds and from the floor up to talent and stuff like that. But we shot a lot of fixed arm stuff too, where we're over the shoulder. We did the reverse. So again, a time saving tool as well.
Yeah. I mean, the most impressive part of that shoot actually to me was how that thing fit in an elevator. It was, we
Yeah,
got there and we're like, oh, no one thought about how do we get this thing up to the third floor.
I
And
was
it's this elevator. It's not even the freight elevator.
no,
It's just the normal.
so it was. They said we have a freight elevator, and so
Uh,
everybody thought, oh, okay, it's a freight elevator. That'll be great. The problem was it was just a regular passenger elevator that they had put blankets in or let people move their furniture in. So it was no bigger than the other elevators. And yeah, luckily it did fit in. Otherwise, we would have been.
yeah. I hope you have a photo of that because it was pretty,
I do. I'll drop one
spectacle.
in. I'll drop one in. It
Yeah.
was, yeah, when the doors opened, we were all pretty shocked, quite frankly. But yeah, I was able to manipulate it in there. And
I
again,
think
yeah, go ahead, Ed.
no, I was just thinking like, this is this and I've used, jibs before, but I have learned a couple of things, especially, understanding what tool you have, which is more accessible now is a tool like yours, like your smaller techno. I think it can be so much more verse, whereas a jib, I have kind of made the mistake of saying, oh, I specifically did just need a jib for a shot, and then you're kind of wishing, oh, when you're talking to the DP or this or that, it's like, oh, I wish we could have done this to make it, articulate and, so definitely I think tool wise, I'm not saying this just to pitch you or your tools, but definitely that little thing is such a well-rounded tool, seriously, unless I needed like a, 30-foot, movie bird or something like that, that one can do a lot. That little guy that you have can do a
Yeah,
lot.
for what it is, I'm pretty happy with it as well.
Yes, I just wanted to say something else about what I learned with the Technocrane is like, I mean, I'm always keeping an eye out for the new tools that are coming out to us and like what can give the set back to an actor. Because I feel like oftentimes we're just giving them all these restrictions, like you can't stand here, you can't do this, the lights here, try to hit that. And that stuff is fine for a lot of things, but when you can kind of give the floor to an actor and let them have at it, this was something that allowed that. I mean, at times it's just the best tool is just a camera on a tripod, and that's perfectly fine. But this was something that's much more like embracing movement, and this was it felt like it kind of gave both the director and the actors the flexibility to explore the stage.
but when we were actively shooting, or when we do actively shoot, and you're on a techno crane, and there are shots where we're just on the techno crane as a tripod. What thought process goes through your head where you're like, well, we can just leave it on the, obviously it's a time saver on the job that we're speaking of directly, but would there ever be a time where you were like, well, you know what, we should just come off and go to a set of sticks just because? Or is it almost always a time saving thing just to leave it on the techno?
I mean, I think it's both. I mean, it's ultimately time. I think that it's to stay on the techno or similar on a Fisher, like, oh, you don't have to, lower the legs and find. You could just be more precise. You can explore things. Like, let's look at up here. What's come down here? No, this. No, you could just kind of find it a lot faster. I think it's about time, really.
As a techno crane guy, I often, and I used to, when I was much earlier in my career, I wanted to move that thing so much. I'm like, but it can do, and I can show, and we can do. And then I realized as I got deeper and deeper into my career that, you know what, sometimes that's not what it's there for. If the DP or director and DP or the storyboard, whatever, calls for the crane to just be up and over and locked off, that's what the tool is for. That's what, yeah, there are cool things that you can do with it, but to be okay to say, yeah, that's what it's for. I mean, it's there to help you guys get what the most out of it that you can. And if it means leaving it on the techno crane for the whole shoot or just using it for two shots that were specifically designed for it, we as operators need to leave that up to you guys. Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to use this, but you're recording it. In my opinion, is Jay has to trust you, Robert, and and vice versa, because although I'm not going to go into the logistics about what happened on another shoot with a techno, but the we got a techno and the person couldn't operate it, to save their life, and it was a hindrance. So we almost did literally pull off the camera from the crane, and it's honestly the saddest thing to say. So,
Yeah.
it's not for viewership for you. It's not to, never going to say who it was, what the project was, but
Right.
the fact that Jay was there, on comms with you. And, I mean, between a DP and myself, we're pretty shorthand, Jay and I about doing them, it's a great collaboration. But if we can't understand each other, or, Jason doesn't understand Robert, or vice versa, it turns into something that is, very, very difficult to get back that time, because you've invested all that time and the tool is there. So, I don't know, like I said, if you're gonna use this portion, but I
No,
think
yeah, that's important. I mean, it's important to say, even when I go out with my large techno, when it takes two people, right? So sometimes you have your arm operator with your joystick guy. Sometimes it's a one person operation, but when you go out with a guy that you work with all the time, just again, it goes back to the relationships that we were talking about between the director and a DP, and a DP and his gaffer, and the DP and his key grip. Once you get into that flow, it does become sort of a shorthand. You know that that person in their department or that skill set has your back, and it is important. Jason and I, it just worked so well that day. It just did, and maybe because we were visually on the same page, and again, I know the tool, and so it was easy for me to, I want to go from here to here, and then maybe I could suggest.
I mean, I remember leaning on you heavily for that because it was like you kind of knew where to put the base for what kind of movement. I felt like there were times where you could have put the rig in different places, but one would enable easier operating on the wheels, And I remember we were trying something, and I was like kind of back wheeling, and it was really tough. And you were like, no, let's move it here. That way, it's all kind of a simpler operating position. So it's
Right.
like
yeah.
working with
That's,
someone
I think
like
that's,
that is key.
I
It's
think it's
like,
part of our job as
oh,
crane guys, even on that fixed, a modular crane that's fixed length. It makes it so much easier sometimes when you just swap a base position 10 feet so that the back pan is not constant or whatever it is. What pulling a techno crane straight back instead of trying to keep a straight line when the base is shifted off axis a little bit, that sort of thing. So yeah, that is, it's not only is it helpful to everybody, that's my job. That's what I'm there for, is to make it go a little smoother. And then, so on that corporate piece, were there any, and I'll throw in some footage later on the corporate piece, were there any spots where you thought, well, this wasn't a techno crane, but we might as well throw that in there because we can.
yeah. I mean, I remember we did something. I think we were moving down a hallway with the talent when they were kind of arriving at that like that. I don't know. It wasn't a party scene, but it was like some sort of scene where people were going into to meet a celebrity or something. And it was something that we would have done with a steady cam had we had it. And I think we'd even planned on doing it with the dolly, but of course we're like out of time, and we're like, well, we'll see what Robert can pull off.
being able to design things that, maybe I didn't think of, or something that, a vision that, you know, a good collaboration. I think that's a great way to say it between a director and a DP, and a DP to a crane operator, and so on and so forth, is like, especially with heat pump, was, I wanted walls to move. How do you achieve it going over crossing a bed? Can you do it? Yeah, of course. You do an offset
Right.
and a whole track, and then we'd have to CG, I mean, we'd have to roto it, or whatever later on, or you'd have to put some off angle, and then Jay would say, oh, you're restricted to this, or, oh, you might see that, and then
It also goes back to what Jason was talking about, letting the actors do what they can do without worrying about this technology thing being in the
oh,
way.
for sure.
I think it also frees up a DP to say, you know what, I do want the shot to travel completely across the bed. Or now that we can,
Yeah.
let's go from one side of the bed in this specific example. Let's go all the way across. And maybe if you're on a dolly and you're on an offset, you have to give up that shot that you may really have wanted just because the tool was limiting. Whereas in something like this, you can say, yeah, creatively, it only called for just looking up and over the bed, but now let's go up and travel across and head to the other room, that sort of thing. So maybe that
Yeah.
tool is
And yeah,
also.
and talking about that shot moving over the bed, it's the other way to have done it would have been with track and offsets and figuring
It,
into it that way. But the part of that that's problematic is then you spend so much time and effort doing this very specific shot, but then maybe once you were looking at it for the first time, you're like, geez, the camera should be like 3 feet to the left. You
well,
know?
that
And
was
that's
that was kind of, I don't know if you both remember this, but we were really like on a time crunch at the very, very end, and we did not get the band performing. We had like some specific shots of the drummer and stuff. And we got some of that shot, most of that shot. I think we got all of the shot list, but I wanted such a variety just for B-roll, just something, it's like, okay, what if this didn't mic up right, or this, that, and you just started swinging that thing around, you and Jay were just like, on the comms, and I remember I was there, and I'm just like, okay, this way, and we're gonna get that, and then Jason would just be talking to you, and then magically swings to the guitarist, and then I'd say, oh, okay, do an underslung. It's like, okay, magically it does that, and then we want the bass to be overhead, and magically it did that, and it was just a continuous roll. I remember, because I was in the edit room, and I'm
right. I
like,
remember it was
okay,
like
one
we have like
roll.
15 minutes to finish the day,
It
right?
was
And
it,
you
it was
just
like,
think,
it's like, it would have been, nothing is impossible, but we've all worked on time crunches, but it was such a, I think, to kind of have that, um I think, JJ having that, we got this attitude, I think, really kind of says volumes about, and like I said, I've always said that this was an awesome shoot, and to have a good relationship between the operator, crane operator, and the DP is also important, which DP is operating the wheels, which is, also a very hard, very difficult thing to do. I mean, I know, I've operated wheels before, and
Yeah.
if I had a director, screaming in my ear, and then, you're still having to translate to a crane person, it's like, you got to have some great skill. So,
Yeah.
kudos to that, and being able to say, yeah, we got this.
Yeah,
We'll take care of
as
it.
a crane guy, and even in some of my other pieces of gear where there are multiple people working on the shot through one lens, if you will, that we're as a crane, we're only as good as the guy on the remote head and vice versa. And if one guy is not
Yeah.
pulling the weight for the other guy, it can be a really long day. Luckily, yeah, Jason and I were both on the same page. That was a crunch getting that band in at the end of the day.
yeah. And
So
I work with wheels, but not in something so dramatic as this, with like such fast movement. It was that definitely was challenging because I've used it more in narrative things on a dolly, and
yeah.
like we're like it's kind of worked out, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. But this was like, yep, like you have to be in the moment, and
We did have a joystick
challenging.
standing by just in case. It definitely
you
goes, it
know.
goes back to that teamwork thing. When you have somebody in a role that you've
Yeah,
hired, obviously, to give them that complete trust and to let them
yeah,
doing their job with direction, obviously, direction for a technocrane from
yeah.
the DP and the DP with direction from the director. It's important to have that trust in that person that you've given that role to.
Yeah, and I'm not, and once again, it's not a plug, but and we don't have to be on a call to say this. I've said it already before. Without your knowledge is that I do tell people about you down here too, in LA. You're great at your job, you have great personality, and you have great tools to do the work, and you do a fabulous job, and
Well, thank you.
and
Thank you
with
for that. I
Jay.
appreciate it.
So
And this
yeah.
part won't make the video, or maybe it'll be a standalone video, actually, now that I think about it. And the check is in the
Yeah.
mail, Ed. So I
No,
appreciate that. No,
no, no,
again,
but
it comes down to,
definitely.
and look, everybody has their people that they work with, and that's
Yeah,
important. And when you build a
yeah,
relationship, which is what this industry is based on relationships.
for
And
sure.
I've always said it might be who you know that gets you the job, but it's what you know that allows you to keep that job. So
Oh, yeah.
it's important to know what you're doing, to have a relationship, to build that relationship between specifically me with the DP or me with the key grip or something. And so when those things gel, that's how people continue to build their careers through those relationships. So I appreciate the kind words and you even having me on that heat pump video. It was awesome.
No, and I mean, this is more a question for Jay, because I've been in the pressure cooker, on your side before. Is like, like where do you even gain the trust? Because it's honestly, I think it's more simplified on my end when I look at a DP reel. Just to be honest, I've been following you since, gosh, Timothy Plain. It's like,
Yeah, with respect. Yeah.
so it's like I know your body of work, and I know what I would like to see us work together on, and same with other DPs, and I look at reels all the time, but you pick an AC out of nowhere, you could be what?
Mm.
You might not hit sharps the whole day. Now you've got somebody slinging a freaking, I don't even know. It doesn't even matter how many pounds, but you got Robert, who obviously can sling it with the best of them. No pun intended, but how do you know? But how do you
Yeah.
do it with
I mean, I think it's
Robert?
the same down the line, right? Just like, I've worked with Robert before and knew he could pull this off, and I worked with
Yeah,
Kelsey a ton, and I knew she could keep up with the
yeah.
focus, and so on and so forth, really. So just all that
Yeah.
experience together.
It's a hard process because, I'll tell you, if it's not in focus, and the camera's all tilted,
No
the only
matter how,
person the only person I'm chasing after
right,
is you, to
right.
be
No
honest.
matter how good the
So,
treatment was, no matter how well it's lit, no matter how well it's operated, if it's not sharp and in focus, especially on a techno crane. And I think we were shooting wide open most of the time.
Yeah, I think we're on the
we're shooting pretty
Cook
close.
Pankrose T2. It's
Yeah.
pretty.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
most of the stuff was a little on the wider side, but there
Yeah.
were multiple challenging things there for an AC to make sure that it
Yeah.
was sharp.
Yeah, but we
Um,
were coming
For
off
sure.
like small details, like the thermostat to the heater,
I
right?
remember,
Yeah, it's like the
yeah,
kind of tough moves
I
there.
think I think we did ask a lot because this is I think another thing about writing a treatment, and then being able to have it come to fruition with everybody, with art direction, with this, that, and other thing. And then, not that I don't follow boards, because we follow boards pretty darn close, but when agency is saying, hey, we may be able to pick up, another spot. I don't know if I should say this, but another sponsor, or we could use this. Let's get this extra thing. And if the AD says, hey, you've got time, Well, Jay, you better get it. You better go for
Mhm.
that thermostat, and you better tell Robert to swing that thing up high. And seriously, that's how we ended up, being able to pull some of that off.
And
Yeah.
do you attribute that to being able to use that tool effectively, and that bought you some time to do those things?
For sure. I
Okay.
think, I mean, for me, for sure, because I was kind of a little bit surprised at how fast it was moving. I didn't know it was going to stay on all. I think I do remember is I don't think we're supposed to have it stay on all day.
I think I
I
was,
can't.
at least by the time we got to the day before, I think I knew it was going to stay on
Oh,
most.
okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we did have a strategy because we could have just dismounted it, right, Robert, and just kind of used it like a full
Correct.
Moby. Like that was an option.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh no, it's
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I don't think. Yeah, I was pretty confident it was going to stay on there.
I mean, most of the things, if you look back at the piece, everything was moving. So
Hmm.
to stay on it made sense. But there were a couple shots, obviously some overhead stuff that
Yeah.
didn't move too much. But
yeah,
I've been on multiple shoots where, again, they really only planned on using, whether it's a modular crane or whatever, they only planned on using it for one or two shots, and we ended up staying on it most of the day. It just
yeah,
is, it's a practical tool to get into places, just like you were talking about dolly and slider instead of a set of sticks. I need to go up a little higher. Well,
for
instead of
sure.
all the ACs and everybody running over to try to raise up the sticks, you just glide up a little bit on the dolly. So similar idea in time savings.
I think also on heat pump, I always thought like, okay, for us to, because we couldn't get I knew, even though I didn't even see the studio, like I knew we could not possibly get the movie bird like in a normal size studio. It just wouldn't fit. And all I could think about, because I always did have that idea of breaking the wall. I always wanted to reveal a wall, not one wall, but reveal two walls.
Yeah.
And the way to do it, could have been steady cam on a Trinity, or sideways or whatever you guys, want to call it, to get it over the
Mhm.
bed, and the other one was over the sofa.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was remedied pretty easily, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that Robert liked the wall breaking apart. So
Absolutely. Well, the versatility, and I think about this often with the Technocrane versus the Steadicam, and they're all individual pieces that you can't do everything with, but they
yeah,
have their
for sure.
need. The beauty of using a small techno like this is you can do those Steadicam rolls across or whatever, but as opposed to a Steadicam, we can also continue that shot to get 20 feet above a bed to look down, if that is what it
Yeah,
calls for. So that's when it's important, right? So again, a time saving tool.
and we got both.
We did indeed.
So thank you both, very much once again.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Hey, thanks for dreaming it up, man.
Right.
now
It's
we'll
important for
dream
me.
All
up
Thank
right.
you.
definitely
Thank
more.
you for explaining
Yeah.
the process. I mean, I know it comes from the director's side and trickles down, but to have a DP that also would say, well, I think this tool would be the way to go is interesting to know that process of how it comes about. So
I mean, I think for sure, it's different, kind of. I know we're running out of time, and I don't I can only speak from my process. I think every director is different, and I'm sure when you speak with other directors and other DPs, they may have a different version. I definitely do trust, the DP and what they're offering. And it's always good to listen and collaborate. And that's my overall goal. But definitely, within the treatment, there's bones, there's a structure to it. And as long as that doesn't change, it is every single person all the way down to the PA that really makes the day.
right.
To be honest, and I know we're only specifically talking about this shoot, but even this shoot, every single person worked and made that, I think, made that vision come true. And
Yeah.
when you speak with other directors, they may have a different process, and it's nice to be able to hear, because
Yeah.
how they derive to that.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. It was good to talk about the process of how it goes from treatment from the director to the DP to a crane vendor like myself. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Jason, Robert. Very much always just appreciate the support and thank you for having me on. And it was great just to reminisce about honestly a pretty darn awesome shoot. And I hope that your viewers enjoyed everything. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun to revisit this piece, and yeah, hope to do it again.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys. Well, there you have it. That's Ed's process of his concept all the way down to getting my mini telescopic crane on set. I hope that you found something entertaining or informative through that interview. I did. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them below and I will get back to you. And if you have any input on something that you would like to see on the channel, please leave that in the comments as well. Thank you for watching and hope to see you on the next episode. All right, cool. Awesome.
Cool.
I think I'm going to be able to put something together.
Nice,
So
dude.
all
I
nine,
love it.
all 9 people can view it.
Yeah.
Look,